Hi, my name is Anna Marie, or Hannah Miriam if you'd like, and today I just want to talk about like a book I read recently. I'm just like gonna go for it, so hopefully this will be vaguely coherent. I'm very happy right now and also very tired, and also I am wearing something I've knit, but I also haven't finished it. Hence the needles, but I wanted to wear it for this because I just thought it would be cute and it would be symbolic too. So the book I wanted to talk about is Milk Fed by Melissa Broder, which I read a couple days ago now. I think I read it in about 2 days, and I read the majority of it over Shabbat, and I just really enjoyed it. It's a book that I felt like I needed to make sure that I would be ready for, because I had read some things about it, especially in terms of eating disorder stuff, and so therefore like body stuff, eating disorders obviously, but also fat phobia specifically. Like I think there's like a tendency to imagine that the people who are harmed by eating disorders and eating disordered talk are like the thin people who are the most visible like sufferers of eating disorders, but obviously that's not true, especially when that same kind of approach to eating disorders itself kind of like reinforces and like almost emphasizes the way that like to be fat is an awful bad thing. And as long as you don't have like such a disordered relationship with food, like you should be trying to be thin. So it's, yeah, it like completely calls into question all of the things that people say about like how you need to be in recovery from like an eating disorder, because they just hate fat people so much and they don't think they should exist. Anyway, but like that was kind of the context that I go into a lot of stuff that like thin people are writing about having an eating disorder, which is that like it's going to be horrible for me to read as a person in a fat body who's trying not to have an eating disorder and who has to battle with, you know, medical healthcare professionals being assholes, people using like science that is not actually science to like you know, reinforce the like moral badness of my body, or the fact that I don't deserve help until I, you know, lose a certain amount of weight, like whatever. And so yeah, I'm very skeptical, I guess, about some things. And then also I just, you know, I'm trying to look after myself. I don't want to like, you know, read a book that's just gonna really upset me about something that is just like a neutral fact about my body, and, you know, is even a little bit sexy sometimes. So yeah, I will leave like a link to this podcast called Maintenance Phase, which I would just like really recommend if you struggle with learning about fatness and fat phobia and health and science, because I think it's just a really excellent podcast for questioning some of the sort of so-called science that comes out of like basically just like fat hatred. And there are also some other resources I guess I could put in the description box, which I might do. You'll have to check. Anyway, to get to Milk Fed, yeah, so that was the reason why I kind of stayed away. I was like, I shouldn't read it unless I'm like mentally going to be okay with reading from the perspective of a woman who has a severe eating disorder, which it does. She is this main character called Rachel. But yeah, it's also queer. Like there was lots of things that like drew me towards it too, and especially because I knew that there was like a fat Orthodox Jewish woman as a kind of central figure in the book, so I did want to read that for her too, and like the discussion of like Jewishness and maybe like fatness too and food. So yeah, I did, and I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it, and also how like exceptionally compelling it was. I started listening to it as I was like, you know, going to bed, getting ready for bed, and I ended up listening to about like an hour of the audiobook in that time, and I really hadn't planned to. I just had planned to like start it and see if I was going to keep going. But yeah, it was just very like readable, and the audiobook is read by the author, whose voice I guess like originally maybe slightly put me off, but I think it was fine in terms of like listening to her read her story, like her writing. I'm not saying she just like based it all off of herself. I'm quite hot in this. But it looks nice, what you can see. Oh yeah, and the stitch mark is still on it. I guess in broad strokes, the novel is about this woman called Rachel who's maybe like 24, I think, like mid-20s. She has like a very restrictive eating disorder, and like she counts calories, and like and it's very present in the text, which I would say as a definite warning if you don't want to read about the specific numbers and mathematics. But I'll talk more about that later, I think, too, because yeah. She has this eating disorder, and it's clear that it's partially or perhaps solely about her relationship with her mother, and specifically, you know, cultivated and like enforced by her mother, having grown up and had her mother like desperately try to control her weight and what she ate. So it's very much about like, yeah, having this difficult relationship with food, which is sort of also a representation of your difficult relationship with your mother, or like what your mother has passed down to you, and as a way to like control you and also to kind of infantilize you for the rest of your life. And then it's about her going to this yogurt place that she normally goes to, and there's like a different person there, and the woman who serves her is this fat Orthodox Jewish woman, and she doesn't like conform to the very specific requirements of Rachel's like yogurt order, and that kind of sets things off. Yeah, it's also about, you know, queer desire, like Rachel's bisexual, which was also a problem for her mother, and so yeah, it's just sort of, it's all about those things together. And it's also, I think, in a really lovely way about like Jewishness and Jewish identity too, and I loved that part, obviously. So yeah, I guess that's all I'll say without going like more in depth. I am going to, because I kind of just want to chat about it, so if you don't want to like know the specifics, then I guess don't watch. But I also think this is one of those books that it's not so much about like the plot, because I also kind of feel like the book is like telling you what it's about, and I think like how like the trajectory of it all is somewhat clear. But yeah, obviously if you don't want any kind of plot or like more in-depth stuff, go ahead and stop listening. I will say, when I started reading it, I did feel like I wondered if there was a way to write the book at the beginning where there's a lot of calorie counting, and I wondered if there was just a way to like actually, you know, have some of it there but not the actual counting, because I felt like maybe a lot of people who would deeply benefit from reading this book would be like super triggered by the very specific and direct conversation about calories like at the beginning. I think as the book gets on, it gets less, because Rachel's desperate hold on her, like, you know, appetite, and therefore the calories that she eats lessens, and that's like obviously much healthier and also much, therefore like much less triggering. I think it's really beautiful, and in a way I guess maybe that's also why like Melissa Broder did keep that in as a way to really show like the progress. I guess I honestly really want people to read this. I want thin people to read this so that they can learn how sexy and okay it is to be fat and to eat what the fuck you want. Like, it's fine. And yeah, I mean, it's a very gross book. It's very like obsessed with bodies, and it's also just very obsessive about food, especially at the beginning, because Rachel is so obsessive about food. Of course, she just constantly thinks about food, and because she's so fucking hungry all the time, she's obsessed with food. It's, you know, this classic dynamic of kind of like, well, you say you can't control yourself eating X biscuits, but that's because you actually don't let yourself eat what you want. But if you just knew that it was okay if you wanted to eat the whole packet or just two, like, it would be fine. It's all neutral. And like, often the reason why you eat the whole packet is because you know like later you're never going to let yourself eat them again, or like, you know what I mean? Scarcity breeds that kind of like panic desire and appetite, which like if you're not scared of appetite at all, and if like, you know, being fat or having your body change somewhat is fine, then you will be fine. Anyway, I just like, I love this book. I really want to talk about one aspect of it, which I know this is like a bit all over the place, but whatever, which is like Rachel starts having these dreams, and also she like, well actually yeah, this is also why I was like, oh my gosh, this book really is like kind of perfect for me to read right now, because I love golems, like I love them. I think they're charming and romantic, even if also there's a lot of like ethical bad stuff going on, and they sometimes turn into these like very violent beings that have to be like destroyed, but that's also partially why I feel sad and sorry for them. But I love them, and I love, you know, reading about them and things about them. And obviously there's this like very iconic golem of Prague, created by Rabbi Judah Ben Low in the like early modern period, like 1500s I think, and Rachel does a bunch of looking up a golem, because in this therapy session, I think her last therapy session, she makes this like plasticine figure, which is this sort of like monstrous fat woman, and she sees it as a golem kind of thing, and it like goes missing and stuff, so she's like, where did it go, you know? And like, it's sort of, in therapy it's supposed to represent her fears of herself, but when she makes it, she like does enjoy making it. There's like, it's great. Yeah, so then she starts doing some research as well into golems, and then through that she comes to Rabbi Judah ben Lo, and then she starts having dreams where he appears, and so like tells her things, and she has these like very sort of mystical visions, and she's eating like she's drinking from like a calla lily, but she can't eat it because it will kill her, but she's just getting just enough, and you know, it's all very symbolic, and I just love that aspect too. And there's also this really lovely bit where it's like near the end, so things have like really progressed for her, and she's clearly let go of a lot of the control that she was like searching for in response to trying to get kind of like maternal love and affection. And the rabbi in her dreams, she asks like a question to him, and the rabbi in her dreams says something like, I don't know, you know, you're my creator. And I just like loved that. It was so beautiful. I don't know if I can like express, I think, you know, I think this book you'll either like enjoy or you won't enjoy. A lot of the like discourse around this book when it first came out that I was aware of was that it was really gross, specifically because it had like mummy kink stuff in, which I guess you can kind of tell from the title. It's called Milk Fed. And then also like Miriam, who's the like fat Orthodox Jewish woman, she is serving yogurt, so like that's obviously like dairy, milk, blah blah blah. And I think, you know, it's obviously fine to just be like, this isn't what I want to read, like it makes me uncomfortable, and like be done with it. But I think, you know, the furore around it was very like intense, and I also feel like quite pointed, and I also think somewhat missed the point. I mean, I think there's a big difference, really, isn't there, between what people do in reality and what they do in fantasy. And I think there's some things that I wouldn't be comfortable reading about as someone's fantasy, but I think like it's important when discussing the way these things are like represented to note when like this is a character's fantasy, and it's not an incestuous fantasy, it's a like she has a fantasy about this like maternal figure who is not her mother, but she does imagine her as her mother in the fantasy. But again, it's still very separate, I would say, even if there is like a strong connection that she sees between her actual mother and this like maternal figure. And also I just think the way that like people talked about it and the way that they went like a bit like highly judgmental, and also just very like sort of, what's the word, like prurient, I don't know, just very like, oh, that's very inappropriate and people shouldn't be reading it. It made me think that there was going to be way more of this like mummy kink stuff, which I also didn't know until I had read it if I would be okay with, and then I found out I was. One of the things I did love about the book is this moment where like Melissa Broder like clearly like in the narrative like is writing in a way to make sure that you're like, okay, we know Rachel doesn't have daddy issues, we know we don't have to talk about that, this book is only about mummy issues. Which I just thought was really funny, and I respected it so much. I mean, it's also about, you know, it's about this woman with a restrictive eating disorder who's very thin, and is thin partially because she does control what she eats and is very meticulous about that, falling in love with a fat woman. And I think, you know, you could also read this book and be like maybe slightly uncomfortable with the way that the fat woman's body and how desire for her is represented. But I personally, as a fat woman, I enjoyed it so much. I thought it was really beautiful, and I also didn't feel like it ever actually got to a point where I felt like Miriam as a character was being so flattened and objectified. I felt like because Miriam was clearly a really distinct character, even if in Rachel's perspective we have a lot of her like intensity and hang-ups being not projected onto but being worked through via her relationship with Miriam, but I felt like, yeah, there was still this like separation there, or the way that the like, because Melissa Broder had created a strong enough character that it was clear to me that Rachel was thinking her stuff and Miriam was existing both separate from and also in line with some of Rachel's like thoughts and feelings about like fatness and eating and etc. I also feel like because Rachel never shared her eating disorder with Miriam in a way that would like kind of burden her with like that horrible information, it made it feel better to me too, because it wasn't like she was just then trying to, like, there was one moment where Rachel like picks an outfit and she describes her thought behind it as being like, I knew I looked thin in this outfit and I did it on purpose. And then when Miriam arrives and is like, oh, you look lovely, Rachel feels bad that she did that as a way to kind of show Miriam up, but she's aware enough and getting like healed enough to know that that's like not necessary or like a way to have a nice relationship. Yeah, I just really like this. I did find at the beginning, like, Miriam's family, she has like a brother, and he is the original person who serves yogurt to Rachel in the way that she likes, and then he's the one who goes away and Miriam replaces him. But Miriam says that like he is going to Israel, and I thought the way that like Rachel first was then kind of thinking about Israel, and like she says like about Miriam, you know, like, oh, she didn't preface it by saying like, I know things are bad there, but, or, you know, obviously like I care about Palestinians, or, you know. And I thought that at first that felt really glib to me, and I really didn't like how it felt like kind of like snarky from Melissa Broder, in the sense of like being like, haha, I bet you had those thoughts, reader, when Miriam mentioned that her brother was going to Israel or something. And I just was a bit like, okay. But then as the book went on, I definitely felt like it was engaged with in a more meaningful way, and in a less like, yeah, superficial kind of like gotcha way. And actually there is like some conversation about it like in the rest of the book with like other Jewish characters, like between Jewish characters, which is quite contentious and difficult, and you know, but I liked that that was included. And I thought ultimately it was well handled. I mean, like, this book is not about that, but I also felt like, because it's talking about Jewish identity and contemporary Jewish identity, and then it's also talking about some people who are, you know, have family members who are like fighting in the IDF, like I think it would be like irresponsible not to have some of that as part of it, especially because also it is part of like discussions about Jewish identity today, and a lot of like contentiousness between Jews in terms of how much like Zionism and Israel like takes up space as part of your Jewish identity, or as an expression of your Jewishness, as opposed to like other things that are not, you know, an ethno-nationalist state. Obviously, because I love Judaism, I really liked that part of this book was also Rachel kind of connecting more with like Jewish practices and ways of being, you know, including like her spending Shabbat with Miriam and Miriam's family and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed that. There's also like some little references to Rachel's grandparents, who were Reform Jews, I think, but they were fat, and I think they were also diabetic, which was like very briefly mentioned, and so they're also this kind of like spectre of somewhat like, you know, fat fear for Rachel, and I guess specifically for Rachel's mother, who's then desperate for her daughter not to be fat like her parents. But they're also this like really beautiful like spectre of like family and Jewish connection too. And yeah, but there's not very much on them. I kind of actually, from talking with a friend about this book, I thought that they would be like a bit more present, but they weren't that present. Yeah, I don't know, I would really recommend this book, you know, if you are okay to read especially the beginning parts. I think one of the things that like Melissa Broder is kind of trying to also represent in this book is the way that like, whilst there's all of this sort of social idea about like fatness and fat bodies being disgusting because they're fat, and like fatness is just gross, and instead I think she's trying to say well, being thin is a gross experience itself, especially when you're trying to maintain it and control your, you know, you have these horrible parameters for you and your body, and so living like that is gross. I mean, the whole book is very visceral, but like especially that first section where Rachel is, you know, showing us like her daily life, which is just so sad, and just so obsessed with, you know, like this protein bar she's going to eat in 4 hours, and this horrible gum she chews, you know, just like really awful kind of rituals themselves, I guess, of desperate thinness, and they are gross, like they're gross. And yeah, I think that's part of it too. So I do feel like you kind of have to like go in expecting that, and kind of being like okay with with such a hyper fixation on bodies and the viscerality of a body and what bodies produce. But I also think that like it's a book that's like worth it, because it leaves you with a sense of like the richness of life. And I mean, it's not all happy ending or anything, but it's I thought it was really great, and I gave it 4 stars originally. I think I upped it on Storygraph to 4.5 because I did just really like it. Yeah, I don't know, it also did, it surprised me how much I like it, like I said, because I did think that from the way people talked about it, it wouldn't be like it was, but ultimately I think it's a very like sweet, I don't want to say careful because I don't think it's careful, but in a way it feels like a generous book, and in a way it feels like a book that's like I said, I just think I wish more people would read it. I wish more people felt like that they could love fatness and fat people, whether or not they became fat or not. Like, I think it's very sad to think about the ways that people like cut themselves off, you know, try to kill their appetite, try to stop themselves from having desires and like being present in the world, because they're so obsessed with being thin, which, what is thinness but like death in the end? I mean, it's not giving you anything. It's not giving you richness. It's not giving you presence or groundedness. Like, it can't love you. It can't hold you. It's just something that a body is. And it's fine, you know? Yeah, I don't know. This has been like a mishmash, but I hope it made sense. I hope I can edit it into some kind of shape. Maybe an overabundant fat shape of a video. Definitely let me know if you've read Milk Fed. And what you thought about it. I would love to hear. If you're like, you know, a golem woman, give me a call. Yeah, I think that's everything I had to say. I'm just very happy, so I'm gonna sign off. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely day when you're watching this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye.